Hi everyone, it's Neil from Mindlocks again, and as it's Loneliness Week 2020, we're going to be discussing the subject today in depth. Now, first of all, I just want to give a quick shout out to everyone on lockdown. Obviously, we're starting to see some easing of it, which is really, really good. However, because we are still in lockdown, loneliness is obviously affecting a lot of people for a variety of different reasons, and obviously we're going to discuss that in depth today, so we'll just get started. Now, loneliness is not always the same as just being alone. It can be affected by a huge amount of different elements to do with the health of an individual. Now, with that being said, loneliness is not classed as a mental health problem on its own. As you'll see by the diagram that's about to pop up, loneliness is very much a cycle. Loneliness can cause mental health problems, or mental health can cause loneliness. And the cycle obviously goes in roundabouts. Now, loneliness itself is a very simple thing. We know what loneliness, how it is to feel lonely. But for someone who's going to the extremes of these, it can be really, really bad. Okay? Now, there's a variety of different reasons for somebody potentially feeling like this, and the first ones we're going to discuss is life events. So it could be that there's a bereavement in the family, or a past bereavement where the person feels lonely. It could be a relationship break or full breakup. It could be, I've seen it time and time again with some of my older friends who have potentially got divorced, where they really struggle with being lonely because they just don't know how to cope on their own. It could be that they're retiring. My dad's going through it just now. He's retiring. He is the age of 65. And I know, because he's a very well connected person, very well orientated person, he will potentially feel a bit lonelier because he's away from work. And that's something he will have to focus on and deal with. It could be uni. I know myself, when I left uni, it was a big change for me. I was used to being at uni for 4 years. So when I left, it was a huge change, and I felt really lonely because all my friends were at uni. Everybody I kind of hung around with was at uni, and all of a sudden we all scattered. Also, it could be going to a new uni as well, from leaving school, things like that. Could be moving to a new area. Obviously, every area is slightly different. Again, it's something that I've been through, having lived in quite a few areas where I felt a bit lonely, obviously, because I've moved to a new area, and that's impacted my mental health. And as the roundabout says, my loneliness has impacted my mental health. My mental health has been impacted by my loneliness. Now, it could also be things like seasonal events, so things like obviously a bereavement or any form of kind of traumatic event within the season throughout the year could trigger someone to feel lonely for a while. Now, that can obviously have an impact further on. It could be a case that it could be related to a death, say in May, and it could mean that the person, is obviously struggling throughout May and June. And that could be a cycle that could be spotted quite easily. So it's something to bear in mind if you're dealing with someone with potentially loneliness issues, where you know that they're coming up to that time of year. It could also be a social background thing. Obviously, everybody's from different backgrounds, different niches within the community. If they move, for example, it could mean that they're left with no friends and family to speak to. Now, it's great. We live in a modern society where we've got internet and these, Zoom calls and everything else. Absolutely fantastic. However, the physical attribution of not actually seeing someone is potentially going to trigger someone to feel very lonely. Background as well. It could be that their background just doesn't fit into the social setting they're in. Obviously in the UK, we are a really multicultural nation, and we're seeing it just now more than anything, that there's clashes between different backgrounds. That needs to, yes, be eradicated, but it's something that, even though it's potentially going to be, eradicated in the future, it's still something that's going to cause issues. No two people are from the same background, same likeness. Could be a money thing. Everything we do nowadays pretty much costs money. Even the simple thing like going for a coffee, costs almost a tenner if you're getting a cake and stuff like that as well. So that can be too expensive for someone, and it could actually isolate them away from being able to go out with their friends and family. Another one is sexual orientation. So, if you're gay, bisexual, or potentially trans, or one of the other terms, it means that obviously you are from a different sexuality background to 90% or more. I don't obviously know the exact figures, but you're more likely to be excluded from certain activities because of that. Now, that again is not correct, but it does happen. So it's something to bear in mind with somebody who's potentially going through loneliness, or for yourself who's lonely. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is obviously the mental health impact. Loneliness can obviously be caused or cause a number of things. The two big ones really that I've read into are self-esteem and confidence, which obviously cause then potentially loneliness. If somebody's not got the self-esteem or the confidence to go out into these social settings, it means that they are putting themselves into an isolated situation, and that means that they are going to feel lonely. The reverse is true as well. A social setting could knock someone's self-esteem. We see it all the time, especially with guys, that there's somebody knock somebody else with it's not meant to be insulting, but with an insult, and it means that that person could actually take it really to heart and feel as if they're excluded from that social group. Now, for me, I work obviously in a rugby setting, in a sailing setting, and various other, pretty male-orientated settings, and yes, I've been at that end of it where somebody's had a dig at me or something, and I have taken it to heart, and it's really impacted my loneliness, made me feel isolated from the group, and impacted my mental health. Now, that's because I wasn't well at the time, but you never know who is potentially suffering from a mental health problem, which then impacts our loneliness based on something that happens like that. So it's something to bear in mind in your social groups. I'm not saying don't have fun, we all love a bit of banter and everything else, but it's definitely something to think about when you're going to have a dig at somebody. It could potentially impact them a much bigger way than you realise. So some tips. Well, first of all, the biggest tip I'm going to give, just in general, if you know someone who's struggling with loneliness, especially just now, just give them a message. Send them a text, pick up the phone, send them an email, Messenger, Zoom, all these things we've got at our hands nowadays. It's so easy to do. I'm very fortunate. I've had a lot of people in my life who have got me through a very bad time. And when I was feeling very lonely, they did pick up the phone. They did send me the text message. And while I ignored them, a lot of the time it did help me get through my day. So it's something to just do straight away if you know somebody who's suffering. But in terms of tips of what you can do for yourself, first of all, slow things down. If you're feeling lonely, it may be because you're in a very stressed situation and you're not taking the time for yourself. Take a step back. Look through your current situation and see why it is that you're potentially feeling lonely, and deal with that issue separately. Try and make some new connections. If it's a self-esteem thing or a confidence thing like we discussed, it could be that you need to get out there and try yourself to make some new connections. Join a social group, even online. Join a sports club, again, even online just now. All these different things can help build those connections and stop you from feeling lonely. Peer support. Find other people that are going through the same thing as you are. Nowadays, there's groups for everything. For example, if you're a rugby player, go and join a rugby club. If you are into law, join a law society. If you're into public speaking, join a public speaking society. There is groups for everything. Open up about it as well. Speaking about loneliness is probably one of the biggest things that I've read about in terms of cure. It means that if you actually talk about it, you're giving one of the biggest chances of you getting over your loneliness, because you are interacting with someone, and that means that you'll get interaction back, and that can help prevent that loneliness in the long term. It also means that you're going to potentially get tips about dealing with it and any associated mental health problems. Now, obviously, there's everything from that to doctors, to mental health nurses, to your friends, to your family, to online blogs, everything. There's so many channels now to speak through. Social care. For example, our chosen charity, Health and Mind, they work with a lot of people who are potentially going to suffer from loneliness because of their mental health problems, and they get them out, they get them speaking to people, they get them associated with what's known as a buddy, and they keep them working on those issues, and that's really important for a lot of them, and it's a really good service. But there's also obviously other services available that are very similar. Don't compare. The biggest one I'm going to give you an example of is Mike Tyson. Had all the money, had all the riches, had all the girls, had the best lifestyle possible. He was still lonely. The reason he was lonely was because he was very, very mentally unwell. You can have everything in the world, you're not necessarily happier than someone else. It's something that I do a lot of, and it's something I need to work on. I do compare myself to other people. It's not a bad thing. However, I watched a very interesting video the other day where it was saying it needs to be an 80-20 split. 80% of the time you need to be focusing on yourself and your positives and what you're working on. And 20% of the time, yes, you need to be looking at what other people are doing. But don't compare yourself to them. Just look at what they've done to potentially feel happier and feel better about themselves and get over, in this case, the loneliness. Don't be scared of working on you. A lot of people suffer from loneliness and they try and go out into social settings and do all of, the social things that their friends are doing and everything else. And that can actually make them worse. It can impact their mental health in a worse way because they're trying to do too much too soon. Or it could be that they're in a toxic group. Take a step back, as we said beginning, and have a look at what's going on in your life. Your sleep pattern, your eating, your mental health, your general physical state. If you can improve all of these things, self-esteem and confidence will come alongside them, and it means that you're less likely to feel lonely in situations where you're isolated, and it also means you'll be better adapted to deal with social settings as well. So finally, guys, all I want to do is obviously say that one final tip again, which is obviously if you're finding someone who's lonely, get a message out to them. Send a text, get on the phone, get on the internet, anything. Just a simple message can save a life. The other thing is as well, guys, if you're feeling lonely, don't be scared to pick up the phone. If you pick up the phone, there will be someone at the other end. If there's not, try someone else. It will work out. Thanks very much, guys. Please like, subscribe and share. Keep sending our message out there all about loneliness this week, and have a good week ahead. Thanks very much.